Well, yeah, welcome everyone to the podcast. This is, as you can see, just us three this week. And what we're going to talk about is something that's probably going to make me feel anxious later. It's some war stories based around live performance. You know, things that have gone wrong, things that can go wrong, preparation, not only bad stories, but, you know, how you can think about that whole world of live performance. And this kind of came about because us three were chatting the other day. And John, you can take this up because John, he won't want to blow his own trumpet, but John is a fantastic drummer, plays loads of gigs. And one band he does is Killer Queen, which has got to be like one of the premier Queen tribute bands in the world, right? You guys play arenas and all kinds. And John mentioned something that just got us all talking, and we were all sharing some stories. And we thought it might be helpful for you guys to have a listen to some of these things, especially if you're a live performer. This stuff will help. So take it away, John.
So, it came apparent to me. I used to teach a lot in schools, privately, and universities. And it came apparent to me that no one really teaches you the mindset that you need to have and the preparation skills of playing in front of A, audiences, and then B, large audiences. It's just assumed that everyone can just do it, which is probably true. But you need certain coping mechanisms, I think, to be prepared to cope, to tackle it head on and own it, I think. Yeah.
You were talking about a Queen specific gig, wasn't it? Like the other day or something that you were saying. That's where it came from. I remember you saying that. You've done these gigs for a long time now. Just a bit of backstory is that, as I understand it anyway, that particular gig, it requires John to be pressing like buttons for backing tracks. You know, if something goes wrong, it's probably the drummer. I think this happens on a lot of gigs. The drummers are the ones that are, you know, triggering samples. They're triggering backing tracks if there are a few of those going on. And if it goes wrong, everyone's looking at you.
Yeah.
But you've done it for such a long time now that you can do these gigs. You're playing in front of 3,000 people. And you mentioned something about having to walk in a certain direction and not see the venue or something.
No, absolutely. So my walk to work, basically, when I'm actually on a gig, is from the side of the stage to my drum kit for sound check, back to the side of the stage, and then I do the same for the actual show. Sometimes it can change my mindset if I walk to the back of the venue, where I actually see the enormity of what I'm about to, or who I'm about to perform to, and the whole thing. And it can kind of shake you a bit. And you have, probably one of the biggest gigs we do, I think it's about 10,000 people, is at Red Rocks Amphitheatre in Denver, which is quite an iconic bucket list venue. And you have to go and have a look up the top there because it's just beautiful. You're a mile high in the sky. You can see just the most amazing view. But that can get in your head as well, you know, because you're looking at the stage and you're going, I didn't feel this kind of pressure when I was just sat at my drum kit because I'm used to that view. Yeah. And it's just learning how everything, well, for me, this is the way I believe it. Everything is in your mind. You know, you can be intimidated by situations like that, or just think, no, I'm going to confront this head on. I'm just going to enjoy it, and I'm just going to breathe, and just not just get through it, but get through it well. And what I find is, especially when going on stage at first, especially in a big, maybe slightly high pressure gig, you have to cope with the first adrenaline hit of being on stage and get through the first songs, and you just basically got to learn to breathe.
Yeah.
You know, and work with that. And I think this is a subject that isn't really talked about much. Or
I don't think it is either. And the other thing is, like, obviously, I mean, how long have you been playing drums and doing? Like, you must have done big gigs when you were a kid, right? And been in front of audiences.
I mean, they were big for me when I was a kid, but probably not very big couple hundred, 300, 400 people.
But even those are necessarily nerve-wracking when you're a kid doing those. But I was kind of quite surprised and glad that you brought that up. Because I mean, we'll all share some stories. Some of them I don't want to, but I'm going. You want to forget?
I've been looking forward to this, Dan.
No, but I think it's like you're right that you don't really tend to hear about these things, and you just sort of assume that we're not world famous musicians, but we we're session guys, and we've played big stages or whatever. Maybe it's different if you're, I don't know, Victor Wooten or Billy Sheehan playing for whoever. Maybe it's different for them. I'd love to know actually, but it was quite refreshing when you mentioned that actually just a slight change of routine can still freak you out with those things.
And I do believe that. I mean, I'm by no means the best drummer in the world, and I know what I can do. I know what I'm capable of, and I'm pretty good. But what I feel I do have is the experience, and that experience kicks in when things start to go wrong on stage. You can just you're in a headspace where you can, and what I mean is when things start to go wrong, it's all technology. When technology has blips,
But I think that's the thing. It's like a lot of people when they think about gigging, it's like being in front of people, making mistakes, somehow humiliating yourself in some way, which kind of never happens. If you make a mistake, well, as a bass player, no one. It depends what you do, but no one's really looking at you. They don't really care. You can,
they do. Dan.
You can play a wrong note. And another bass player joke. You don't need them, but I mean, I don't know. Like, I think for me, like, I want to talk to you in a second, Gary, because you had some stories as well. But for me, the other reason I wanted to bring this up and talk through it is because, like, I started bass at 11 years old. And the music teacher we had at that time was on a real path to put the school on the map. And part of that was to get a band from the school to get to the school's proms. So there are classical proms in England, and they're at the Royal Albert Hall, which is like a really famous music venue in London. And
that's an amazing first gig.
Well, the school's proms, you do all these regional gigs around the country, and then if you're good enough, you go to that level, and then you get to the Queen Elizabeth Hall, then the Festival Hall, and then the Albert Hall if you sort of get through. And we did get through. And so I can't remember the regional gig. I do remember the Queen Elizabeth Hall. I do remember the Festival Hall, and I do remember the Albert Hall. And those were some of my first gigs. And then, but also like school things as well, where, there are several hundred people in front of you. I was kind of lucky in a way that it was all a bit of a whirlwind. At that age, you just do what you're told, and you suddenly, through no effort on your part, you're put in these situations, and you just go with it. When you're younger, you just don't really think about it. And so, yes, from 11 years old to COVID, I was gigging, all the time. And then COVID stopped gigs for all of us. And then I'm talking to you from Singapore. My wife got a job here. So I haven't had a gig since 2020, and it's 2025 now. And I've just reached that point where it just has to change. I'm mostly doing YouTube stuff. I want to get back on stage. And even me, with that experience, 33 years of playing, there's apprehension there. Even if it's some tiny little bar or something, it's just that worm gets in your head, making you think, oh, are you going to remember how to play? I mean, stamina is definitely not going to be there, but it's kind of a bit irrational because I know I can do those things.
Yeah.
And, it's like, it's kind of reassuring to know that probably most of us think roughly the same way. But I kind of wanted to do this podcast to give people encouragement that I think a lot of people listening maybe haven't done too many gigs and want to do more and are thinking I'm not good enough. But I just think preparation is key. What you said is experience. And how do you get experience? You just have to do it, don't you? You have to.
Baptisms of fire.
And you learn more in one gig than you will in 500 rehearsals.
Absolutely.
Well, you learn actually what you need to know. Like, so, from a bass point of view, you might be doing all this fancy stuff. Then you realize, well, actually, it's just playing the right notes in the right time, and then you understand what gear you need and things like that. But I mean, Gary, have you got anything to say at all, or we can share the war stories coming up? But
I mean, well, after we touched on it the other day, I went away and thought about it, and thought about. I mean, I remember doing things 4 years old in front of the class or nativity at school or whatever, and you feel nervous no matter what you're doing. If you're best man speaking, at a wedding, or if you're even standing up toasting at Christmas or whatever, you don't want to fluff your lines or whatever. But I think that you naturally, that adrenaline is there to serve a purpose, you know. And the preparation's key, like John says. You got to be prepared, not over prepared, because I think there's a balance. But you've got to at least put the work in, so that you know what you're going to do, and you have a plan B as well, which again you learn with the more experience of doing these things. But I was just trying to work out why, like the things that were making me nervous whenever I was playing in front of 3 people in the 12 Bar Club in Denmark Street, you know, like literally 3 people. I mean, we had gigs where we'd introduce the band and then introduce the audience. You know, it was so fucking small.
Gary, that was a great little venue, wasn't it?
It was a brilliant venue. I only played there once, but it was brilliant.
I have played there once.
Yeah, really good. But for me, like Killer Queen at Red Rocks, like the pressure must be massive, and you want to put in a good performance because you've got the responsibility of the band, of the people paying for their tickets and so on. So that's bona fide pressure. But like playing in front of 3 people at a shitty gig, that's pressure as well, because whenever I was in my teens and 20s, the pressure that was being put upon myself was like, are we going to bump into an A&R person there? So we got to do a good gig in case we're discovered. All those ridiculous things that starting out imposes on you, those sorts of pressures, but whatever way, no matter what scenario and what your background is and your experience, you're going to put those pressures on yourself, whether they exist or not, and that's just human nature. And it's about learning to cope, and learning to cope when things go sideways as well. This sort of my son, he's DJing for the first time ever, the last few months, and he gets a mix wrong, a transition wrong, and he just stops and looks up at me instead of cracking on, and if you just cracked on, nobody noticed, and I think those sorts of things, just knowing how to think on your feet, is just imperative, really.
I think confidence is not what you feel sometimes, but it's what you let out. It's what you project, do you know?
Yes.
And I've been on gigs before where people are going, oh God, that bit, I'm not sure if I'll get that. I mean, it should be right, but I'm not. And then that doesn't give me confidence in them. And it's like a sort of cycle.
Oh, that's really interesting. One of the stories I was going to mention was I was doing a show in a pit band, and I can't remember the theatre, but one of these, like, I don't know, like 700, 800 person theatres, and a professional production, and you rehearse and then you do the show, and everything was fine. I think we did 3 nights or something like that, a couple of matinees, whatever. And I'll never forget one of them in particular. There was just no reason for this, but the MD, she just was a bit jumpy that day, and I'm not really sure why. And she looked over to me on the left, and I was playing my Music Man Stingray, which, not to get too technical, but it needs a battery in it. If the battery runs out, the bass cuts out, right? So I had a spare battery just in case that happened. No problem. I just put the battery in, and I had a fresh one anyway, but I had the battery there. And she was like, oh, what's that battery for? And I explained what I just explained, and she got really, is that going to happen? Is that going to happen? Oh my God. This is like, it's like 2 minutes before we started. And her nerves, based on me and my battery, really, really put me off. And I was just like, whoa, this is crazy. And it shook me a bit, and it transferred into like the first number. And I was a little bit shaky because of just her nerves. It just transmitted. Right. Yeah. And actually the whole band, not, I don't think, because of me, but just the whole atmosphere wasn't great. We didn't have a great one that night. And I think that's another thing. It's just like, things happen, mistakes happen. I think we need to remember it's the music business, isn't it? It's entertainment, and people are there to be entertained, and they don't I don't know. It's like you said, if you make a mistake or anything, but you just seem confident, I don't think anyone really cares. It's the vibe, isn't it, that they're after.
They want you to succeed as well, more times than not, you know.
Yeah,
so
They do, yeah.
One for me that there was a few years back where we had Red Rocks the next day, and I woke up in bed that morning in my hotel, probably about 5 a.m, shaking, you know, and I was looking at this glass of water going, I really need to drink. And I was looking for a couple of hours and I just didn't have the energy to get it. I'm going, oh no, we got Red Rocks tonight. I mean, if I'm not well, do they cancel 10,000 tickets? Do you know what I mean? And I was so ill, right? And I had to, because no one, and this is the right thing to do, because no one else wanted to get ill, I had to stay on my own. So I was feeling a little bit, you know, you get the flu blues, you feel a little bit low, you feel like you haven't had any social interaction that day. And I was just basically in a room on my own and went on stage on my own. And I had to dig so deep, so deep. And I was struggling to count 4 at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then again, you do find it in yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a fever on stage, but you do find it in yourself to actually dig deep, because
This
is what you have to do.
Yeah, I the first gig I had when we bought a place. Me and my girlfriend at the time, wife now, the nearest tube station was Acton Town, and the first gig I had in that place, it was amazing. It was at Buckingham Palace, and it was the Queen's Jubilee or something like that. There was some sort of like festival, and I was playing for an artist called Katie Mellower, and it was one song that Mike Batt had written for the Queen. I think anyway, one song. We were playing with the National Youth Orchestra, who were amazing, and we had rehearsals. The song was quite easy to do. We were there 3 days. The first day was great and pretty easy. The second day, I didn't have full on flu, but I had something wasn't quite right. I just didn't feel very well. And I went on stage, and it was really hot. It was just an unusual English summer's day. So we're in Buckingham Palace. There's loads of people there, public, but I could also see like some of the royal family. And we had to wear this suit. And I just started to feel like these tingles like shooting down my arms, weird. And then your mind takes over. I started to feel faint, and I don't faint. I'm not someone who faints. And I was just there. There's cameras, there's TV cameras and stuff like that. And you're just there thinking, this is not great. Okay, it's only one song and it's 3 minutes. You can get through this. And the punchline is I did get through it. But I just remember feeling like, this is really, really bad.
Yes,
but, one thing, which is a tip that you mentioned, which is really, I think, such a simple but good tip, is to breathe. Because sometimes you get a bit, I don't know, body, you get a bit het up, like panicky. And it's never really happened to me on stage. And I wasn't panicking then. I was just like, this doesn't feel good. But you just breathe, and you just try and sort of get through it, keep playing. And, that's kind of shows.
I agree.
Isn't it?
Gary, you were saying that your first 2 gigs that you ever did were on the same day.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
With the sort of schoolhouse music competition in the afternoon in front of 900 people, and then we'd our band had a gig that evening in the cricket club just down the road. In front of, it was about maybe 40 people, 50 people, and that was far more nerve-wracking than playing in front of 900 people, And I think it was mainly because it just wasn't serious. It was just a bit of fun, and I wasn't singing either. I was just playing guitar. But in the gig later on, it was my band, and again, we thought it was really important. It was our first ever gig.
Yeah,
I'd sung in public and all the rest of it.
It's huge.
It is massive, And I look back, it was so funny. We had to get our friend to play the guitar solo in Stairway to Heaven, because me and the other guitarists were so shit. We were such a crap band. But yeah, it was really nerve wracking. And I thought whenever I stood up to the mic to start singing the first song, which was Caroline by Status Quo, which again is cringe. I thought I was going to faint. I literally took a head bubble because I was so nervous.
Yeah.
And you're also you're standing in front of people who are literally nose to nose to you, because it was such a small venue.
Do you know what? I find smaller gigs much more nerve-wracking than big gigs.
Yeah, you can see the whites of their eyes.
Right, exactly. You can feel big gigs, like the front row is probably, I don't know, a couple of 100 feet away. There's not as much of an interaction.
But I think that's part of the trick, is just to get enough gigs under your belt just to realize that you just need to relax and have fun. I mean, you're not there to put yourself through this emotional roller coaster, and it's not really about you, is it? It's about the music. It's about the whole thing. And like,
you need to be forgiving with your bandmates as well. Be forgiving with yourself, but forgiving with people who invariably screw up as well, because that sort of glaring at each other and everything. That's just not
I mean, maybe this is another podcast, but there's a sort of limit to that, isn't there? I've played with a few people where like it didn't seem quite up to the standard, and it's like, at a certain level you can't really excuse that. But I've been in plenty of amateur bands where you deal with the raw materials you have, and that's just the way it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you have any? I've got a few others. Like you think of some, but I mean, I think the point of this, it's like therapy for us, isn't it? Actually, it's therapy for me, because
making me sweat even thinking about it.
I'll document it, because like I say, I want to get back into it. And I remember actually, John, when I came to Singapore, I think it was like 2020, and you called me up because there was a possibility, which it didn't come through in the end, but there was a possibility of it was a gig for Ukraine. Do you remember this? It was a possible charity gig Ukraine. I think it was Andrea Bocelli, wasn't it? And it was Wembley Stadium or something like that.
That's right.
And I think it was a good year or a year and a half after COVID started. And that sort of first thing where the organizers call you and everything, and you were like, do I want to do it? And that would have been I
forgot about that.
That would have been my first gig, and it would have been another like one song job, a bit like
Anthem.
Live Aid or something like
Anthem
that.
Or something like that, with a big choir and orchestra and bass and a rhythm section.
Yeah, I mean, I initially said, look, I can't do this, because I think I was in France so it was a summer. It was probably summer 2021. Then my wife was like, what are you talking about? You've got to do that. You would fly back and then do the rehearsal, then do the gig. But that would have been my first gig at Wembley Stadium. Yeah. With some big ass. But, I just think you have to grab these opportunities, and it didn't happen in the end. But
that's what I love about music and being music. You don't know what's around the corner. Someone can think of you for doing something.
Yeah.
And and you just don't know.
But you get yourself to, like, the reason now I'd be a bit nervous is that I started full-time professionalism as a musician 2003, although I'd been playing from the age of 11 like every week, but when I started professionally, it was you get your iron, don't you? You get the stamina thing, you get your ears are sharp, and you can play a 2-hour gig and there's no problems. Like now I would not be able to do that. And that's just a fact. I just wouldn't. It would take a few gigs to get that sort of fitness up and running. So there's always a bit of something with that. But and obviously there's different levels. If you want to be a full-time session player, your chops need to be. They absolutely have to be there. There's no question about that. So I'm not saying I want to get back into that like right now, but some gigs definitely would be cool. I think I would probably like play the set for 2 weeks, just every day. Twice, just to get the stamina thing up, because that's the first thing, is you've got to take care of your business. You've got to be able to do what you've got to do. Then you can, I think, like if you're doing a gig for the first time, when you come in, it's that thing of going, oh yeah, that angle of looking at the stage makes me a bit nervous about that. And then and then there's like there's all kinds of things. I mean, I remember like a little strap button on my Warwick. It's like a lock thing. I think is it a Dunlop lock? I'm not sure, but it goes into the top horn of the bass, and it just like did this TV interview thing. Like the first, I was at school. It was with our friend Mike Crook, and it was to be the house band on this thing. We'd never done anything like that before. And Mike is 2 years older than me. So he had done a bit of stuff in the industry before, even at school. And so he was a bit like, he was kind of used to these kinds of things. But he was at Edinburgh Festival gigging. And there was me and a couple of other guys in this band. So two were my age. So I guess I was 16 and the other guy was 15. And we were, laughing, joking, giving it all that in the car on the way up. The keyboard player, Phil, his dad gave us a lift. We didn't really know what we were walking into, but we turned up and then we went up these stairs into this TV studio. Door opened, this massive big camera on us. And we all instantly just shrunk into our shells, didn't say anything, looked at it's just like we and then Mike turned up like a bit later and it was all cool. But during the performance, my strap fell off. So they were filming the auditions. No. And we were playing and my strap just fell off. So what? So I had to put it back in and keep playing. And it's just like,
yeah,
never in a million years would I have thought that would happen. It wasn't like live TV or anything, luckily, but it was, and I don't think this program ever came out, thankfully. I don't know if they keep this film anywhere, but you just don't think that's ever going to happen. And that comes down to, I was much younger. That comes down to, I never used those straps again. To this day, I use, the Dunlop ones are the good ones. The Warwick ones at the time were not the good ones. So yeah, I've seen it happen before. I've seen it on other people's instruments. I've seen some of the strap blocks fall off in gigs.
Really? Yeah.
You don't think things like that are going to happen, but things like that do happen, and instruments, fail. So you have a spare, and you make sure your gear is maintained. You make sure you know your stuff. You make sure you've thought of every possibility, so that when the one thing happens that you never thought of, you can just sort of, deal with it.
I had a situation the other week where I thought I was just going to do a gig to Depp for a band, to fill in as a drummer for a band. So the gig was fairly pressurized because I have all these medleys to track. So you're playing against a click track and whatnot. So the gig was about an hour, but you have to have your head on. But I didn't realize there was an award ceremony beforehand at Birmingham City Football Club, right? And I was like, oh, okay, so we're doing all the stings as the awards are being handed out. And then we go straight into this gig on stage afterwards. And I was handed a 50-page script, right? And a talkback mic that all the other band could hear me with. And I was going, oh, okay. And there's a football TV pundit on stage doing the awards and everything. And so I work out through the script who's who. And basically we had to have a few probably about 15 different songs as little stings, but you don't know how long they're going to be because you have to wait for people to walk up and then get to the microphone. So I'm reading through the script. I'm going, okay, lads, going to pick up the pieces. Give us 3, 4 in, and then I'll count you out. So she's going, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the stage. I'm going 3, 4, and then you have to. I tell you what, at the end of those 3 hours, which was the whole awards, I was absolutely frazzled. Yeah,
sure.
I basically had to stop at every service station on the way home from Birmingham to Maidstone, which is probably about usually a 2.5 hour drive. I got home at 5:30 in the morning. It was light. But it was one of those ones where you just have to go, okay, this is the situation I'm in. I've just got to own it,
You need to fire your agent.
Yeah.
This reminds this that thing of owning it. Like you sort of have to learn that. This is a slightly different type of story, but so I remember this was 2003 because my bass got stolen in that year, and I bought the new one, that Stingray I was talking to you about earlier with the battery. So it was that year. I was 22 years old, going into the industry, and again with that guy Mike. So I lived with Mike for a while, and he got me quite a few gigs, and we did this brilliant band that it was just such a good laugh. It's like kind of live hip hop with a bit of dancey stuff. Mike had the small 10-inch snare, you got that tight dancey type feel. I loved it. It was a really great band. We had this gig at Warwick Castle. And this is a problem I never had before that gig or since. It's a very niche problem. Like maybe might need to psychoanalyze me here. So like it was Warwick Castle. We were supporting Will Young, and it was another rare English summer's day. Everyone in the band, like, you know, seasoned professionals, really looking forward to it. They're kind of low pressure gigs, those ones, because, you know, no one's there to see you. But I remember there was like, you know, a few hundred people milling around, and you know, it was such a fun band to do. But this is the weird thing. Like, so that's on the stage. Felt really great, like just not nervous or freaked out in any way, and just interacting well. This is the weird thing that happened. I was just like on the stage, and I just, you know, I sometimes like to look out to the crowd, you know, not interact, because I'm one of the, I don't move around much as a bass player. I'm one of these, like, you stay back and let everyone else do it, right? But I caught the eye of this blonde girl, right? Or rather, she was just like, she was staring at me, absolutely staring at me, but not smiling. It was, and you know when like you catch someone's eye, one or other of you either looks away or you smile or whatever. Right? She was locked on me, right? And I looked away, and I was like, okay. And I looked back, and she's still staring at me, right? Just like, she was really attractive, right? But also, I thought she was going to kill me. It was just a weird dichotomy. And just like the whole time, she was just staring, and it put me off in, I can't describe. I don't know why it put me off. Like, why, you know, we've had audience interactions before in smaller gigs, but with this, it was just, I don't know why it threw me. Like I didn't, nothing happened. I didn't sort of fall apart or anything, but it was just like, I was having a great time here, and now I'm just a bit like,
was she giving you, like, was it sexy stalker looks?
No, it was like, I don't know how to describe it. I can still see the eyes. They were like, just sort of like laser beams. But that was the thing that freaked me out. It wasn't. Yeah. There was no smiling. There was no like. It's just nothing there. And
that's amazing, Dan.
But
did you chat to her afterwards?
Absolutely not. No, I just it was like a film where like it was just there, and then eventually you look and it's not there. But
I'm kind of seeing the penguin off of Wallace and Gromit. It's always in the back, just staring.
Yeah, that's the best way. We can please edit that in if we can.
Yeah.
I just never forget that. It's like you said, it didn't make me nervous. It just puts you on the tracks, and then you're sort of off the tracks, and you don't know. So yeah, that never happened before, and it never happened since. And you know, well, these days you want a blonde lady to be looking at you. It doesn't happen at our age, but
we touched on this. I can't remember which of you mentioned it, but one of the band playing in the wrong key is something you can't really come back from mid-song.
We've had that before. We had that on like a function. I mentioned that story in a Hyde Park gig of a band, but it's happened. You know, you can see how it might happen if you know you have a member of the band whose hearing is not quite there because, well, you know, hearing loss occurs. Maybe the monitoring is not so great, and thirdly, you think you're in X key when you're in Y key. That's happened before with Sex on Fire. It was just like, it was a big stage, and the person in question was really, really funny. Older gentleman. He was rocking out. He's such a cool guy. I won't obviously mention names, but just rocking out, but on a big stage, sort of looking the wrong way. And he was sort of off on his own, and the rest of the band were all this way in a different key, and we were all like, "Hey, over here." He was just busy. We're all playing.
What name did you shout when you were trying to get their attention?
Well, I can't say that for family reasons, and I can't give his name away either. But it was those kind of gigs. We've done a lot of those gigs, like me and John, where it's just parties or corporate events or awards or, you know, things like that. And I mean, a lot of the sort of the target of those gigs is to have fun, and if you're having fun on stage, that transfers. You're supposed to entertain. So I find there's a bit less pressure on those gigs, even though like some of them are like, you know, massive gigs in really expensive hotels, and you know, quite high stakes. You don't want to get anything too wrong, you know. First dance, I remember like I learned the wrong first dance. I can say the name because he's a great guy, and this doesn't reflect badly on him at all. Danny Mills, brilliant piano player from London. Anyone in London, if you want a piano guy, he's your man. Singer.
He's unbelievable.
Where does he play? American Bar at the Ritz? Or,
yeah, Dorchester.
Dorchester, all that. He's such a great guy. And he's got a function band. We could do a whole podcast on his band. But there's so many things on that band that I remember, like we were in a hotel, the Rosewood. It's that sort of gig, hotel gig. And he was expanding from the whole piano thing, going into different bands. And he gave me this massive long list of songs. I was just, there's no chance I could learn all these songs. So I did my best. And then sure enough, he'd just be going off on one. But really fun and just like, he's just, do what you can and really low pressure and someone would shout something out at the bar and he'd play it and that gig really, really made my ear have to improve. It's like, okay, well, I need to learn how to do that then. And his gig really, really helped me out for that. I'm blanking on what I was going to say. What was I saying before about one
of his gigs?
Yeah, about one of his gigs. Something happened on. Well, I mean, I'm a bit distracted by the drumstick story, but I think we might have told that before. But
yeah,
it'll come back to me.
The drunkenness from the audiences on those gigs is just insane. And do you remember that woman? We did this. It was basically like a kid's christening, but all the adults just saw it as a just a massive drink up. Right? I don't think the kid was even there for long. Anyway, there was a woman who looked like Vanessa Feltz.
Oh yes,
TV.
I remember this.
Right, and she was so drunk, Gary. Right, and then there was this like fold back wedge monitor, like triangular kind of. Mate, I've never seen anyone fall backwards over a monitor, and it's almost like her back molded to it. And Dan looked at me and went, Phelps has tumbled.
She's down.
Phelps is down. Oh, it's so funny. Yeah, there's so many stories. You're right. You could do a whole podcast on just the stories from his band.
We just going back to talking to any younger musicians or musicians who haven't gigged before, and playing out of key or whatever. Monitoring is so key. Because it's so different from rehearsing or playing on your own. On all the sort of the acoustics of the varying acoustics in the different venues and stuff. And sometimes you just can't, especially if you're singing, it's really hard to pitch sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just can't hear the monitoring at all. It's really problematic. So again, that's something that you learn how to cope with.
I think this might be a good part of the podcast actually to move into like actual solid tips of that. So going on from that, it's like the sound check is really, really important. And also like you sort of you're concerned about yourself, but everyone is in the band. So you kind of can't always get your way because the sound person is moving to the next guy and you don't always get your way, do you? But I think you've got to be quite insistent on whatever it is. You might have in-ears, like John, you use in-ears, but you might have a monitor. If you're a bass player, you've got an amp, try and put it up a bit higher if you can. But that's the thing. You do all this practice and then you go to the gig and you can't hear yourself. It's so common that that's the case. So you learn from that. You learn that it's incredibly important to have the correct gear in place to be able to do the thing you're there to do. Sort of making fun of the guy before, but he couldn't hear everything well enough. It wasn't his fault, really. I mean, it was because he played in the wrong key. But obviously, if you can hear everything brilliantly, then you catch it immediately. And if you can't, and you're looking the other way, it can be a problem. So that's the first thing: is get to sound check on time. Make sure your gear is decent. Fight a little bit to get the best sounds you can from whatever engineers are there. And
I'm nice to the engineers.
Yeah, you can always blame them. Yeah,
you need a sympathetic engineer, don't you? So being a gobshite to the engineer is not a good idea.
Agreed. Yeah.
Especially when there are lots of bands on, it's not just you, and they've got to deal with multiple individuals in the band and other bands, and it's kind of you're there wanting your sound to be perfect, and it's never going to be.
I always ask on any gig these days, small, big, whatever, have they got a router, a Wi-Fi router with an app, so I can have an app so I can do my own mix? And 9 out of 10 times these days, people do.
Yeah, that's really. What do you use for that then? So what app do you use?
There's a whole load of apps. It depends what desk they've got. So each desk has a few apps that work with them, you know.
But what are you going through? Like, is it going through your what's this hardware setup to achieve that?
I have. If I was just roaming around, they'd usually give me like a wireless pack, but I just got a tiny little mixer with 2 inputs, and if I need a click in, I just put that in input 1, and then my monitor feed and put that in input 2, and then I've got these molded in-ears, but you can just get generic ones for 30-40 quid, which would do the job. And then I just go into that, and then usually if I have got a router, I can download the app, log in, and then literally do my own mix. It's perfect.
Yeah. No, that's good. Another thing I remember, again, it was that Katie Mellower thing, and they all use in-ears. This was years ago, but they all had good ones. And because I didn't own a pair of in-ears, I would be given just some generic ones, which is okay. But even that we would rehearse with in-ears, and that was new to me. So getting your own mix was crucial with that. But I remember with her, we once did this festival. It was like 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle, somewhere in like Norway or something. And again, I think we were playing 1 song or 2 songs, or maybe 3 maximum. So it's like, okay, from a musical point of view, this isn't that difficult. And I remember I was using a 5-string. So like, first of all, in sound check, like it had 2 pickups, jazz bass pickups, and if you're not dead in the center, it can buzz a bit, and you could really hear that in the in-ears, and everyone else could, right? So that's okay, because I could put it in the middle, and that. But I didn't know that until I got there, how bad it would be, because electrics are different in different stages. Yeah. So I remember that gig. Yeah, I remember being like, it's always that waiting thing, and this is, again, for me, that's the worst part of gigs, especially the bigger ones where you naturally a little bit more nervous. Once you're on stage, it tends to be okay, but I remember just limbering up a bit beforehand. Some people like to warm up, get your hands on the instrument. I sort of recommend that, but in this case I wasn't, because the bass was on stage. And I remember just sort of like doing the whole breathing thing. I wasn't massively into that back then. Like I'd have to let you know in future gigs, because I don't know what I'd do now. But I remember going on stage, putting my bass on, and the drummer is Henry Spinetti, who's a legendary drummer. He played with Tina Turner, Eric Clapton, everyone, older guy, brilliant guy. And he was like, laughing at me and pointing at me, because it was so cold up there, right? I put my hands were like shaking like this, like not through nerves, but because I was like so cold. And the bass, obviously, you need to be a bit limbered up, and luckily I wasn't. You're not playing any kind of jazz fusion or anything like that. But I just remember like having to be careful not to get that to clatter the strings. And again, it's like, well, okay, well, I've never had that problem before. There's another one on the list, on the mental list, if ever that happens again. And like, just you sort of do gigs, and you find out. Unfortunately, you find out on the spot the problem. Like, another time I was playing this down here, some of my 68p bass had flat wounds on it, and this was an outdoor gig, Canary Wharf. And what I learned on that gig was that in the English summer, if it's been sunny and it suddenly rains, something happens with the humidity, and the strings get a bit almost wet, and I couldn't really play the things I was supposed to play because of the feel of the strings.
No way.
But the bass was perfect. It was a Motown gig. The bass was perfect for that.
Yeah.
But in future, again, it's a gear thing. It's like, maybe now I know that's what those flat wounds on that bass does.
Yeah.
You would make a different bit of gear selection for that.
Yeah.
That's just, but you don't know those things. Those are the kinds of things that you just have to. It's like we've had a few of those stories today where it's just you have to get through them in the moment, and I don't think no one really cares if you're struggling. You just kind of got to
do
it, and then you learn. You learn from that for the next time. That's and hopefully there is a next time.
So Dan, what sort of scenario do you imagine your first gig back in the saddle is going to be? Do you have any ideas?
Well, so my wife got this job in Singapore. She's got another job coming up in Kuala Lumpur, which is the capital of Malaysia, which is not far. It's up north of here. So we're moving country. There's a bit more of a music scene there, to the extent that the place that we're here in Singapore is a good music scene, but it's not massively vibrant. I remember going across the border. You can get I'm in the south of Singapore here, and the north of Singapore is like a 40-minute drive like to there, and then you can hop across to the border to a place called Johor in Malaysia. And I remember going there and just like there were buskers, and it's that they have a bit more of a free and easy music culture. And the place, the nearest shopping mall near where we're probably going to live, there was a band like the kind we're in, or what I was in, just playing, covers and stuff like that, just literally there, which you wouldn't really necessarily see here. So to answer your question, I mean, maybe ask if I can have a little play with them, or it's hard when you go to a new place and you don't know anyone. It sort of can be I'll definitely keep everyone informed about this, because that's good as well. And how do you get into a new music scene? And I think first you have to ask what you want from it. So I don't necessarily want to become a working bass player again because of the family commitments and the YouTube stuff I'm doing. But I would imagine just that, Gary, just in a bar or a pub, something low key. I always thought that those best gigs, I mean, the Danny Mills ones, the best ones of those, we would do some gigs in the heart of the city by the Bank of England around there. And it would just be, I remember one gig, you walk into this pub and there's like a row of like a bench, and we're all just set up across that, and you have to, because people are walking in. So you're set up in this really bizarre way, like punters are just walking straight past you. But it's just the most fun. Just those gigs.
Good vibe, isn't it?
Those ones were some of the most fun gigs I've ever done. And I think actually, I remember thinking at the time that it was because if you take that same band and put them in a party or awards ceremony or anything like that, you've got a big group of people from a company or from a wedding or something. But in a pub, it's all different groups of people. So there's something about that dynamic that makes it just a lot. And it's not a music pub or anything. It's just a trio just playing. And I'd love a gig like that. Just, just do it for beer and a free meal. And that's what I love to do. But I mean, who knows? With music, I'd be on the scrap heap now if I was a footballer or something like that. But as a musician, you can hopefully, touch wood, you can keep. My favorite bass players are like Leland Sklar, the guy with the beard. He's in his late 70s, still playing with Toto and
I agree.
Phil Collins and all that lot. So
yeah,
maybe I can take over the Collins gig when he gets a bit too old.
Yeah. Just going
anyone got any other? I do have another nightmare story if you want.
Oh, I'd love to hear a nightmare story.
This one was horrible. I think I'm okay to say it now, but so I depped on Les Miserables, in the West End, the musical, and my old bass teacher Don Palmer, brilliant bass teacher and player. He did that show for years. It was on bass guitar. Now I think it's up right now. They kept on like firing the band and getting backing tracks and stuff. So with that gig, what you would do is there's no rehearsal. You would get the pad and then you'd get a live recording. You'd go home and you practice it all. And then the very, very first time you have to go into the pit, if like 4 or 5 times and watch what's happening. You don't play, you just watch. And, you observe, and then when you sort of feel you're comfortable to do it, you do it. And I remember turning up early. If you're depping, who you're depping for has to be with you, like on the first gig, just to check everything's okay. And Dom had been doing that gig for years. I mean, he literally could do it in his sleep, and it's not easy. Like that gig is not like John counting off 1, 2, 3, 4, and you play a beat and you're in. It's very much orchestral, and you're to the stick. And I learned so many things on that first one. There were 2 MDs. There's one guy who I could follow him so clearly, and there was another guy who did something a bit that you couldn't quite follow him. I couldn't quite follow him as easily as the other guy. And it was that second one who was the conductor when I did my first show. So you get there, and it was a quite weird dynamic in that pit. There were some people that had been there from the very first show 25 years ago, and there were some new people, and there was quite a bit of like tension between certain members. And you're in the middle. I was next. I don't remember his name, but I was next to a keyboard player. Really fascinating. He was he had a computer, and he was triggering samples. Right, he could play any note on the keyboard, but it had to be the correct rhythm. So it's this really bizarre job, really high pressure. And he was next to me, and I would chat to him. He's a great guy. But then, is this the first? I've got a few. Yeah, I think this is the first time I did it, right? So you're chatting and I'm relaxed. You know, I've practiced hours and hours and hours and hours. But then everyone's relaxed. But then the red light goes. They get a call from the front, and there's a red light, and it goes off, and everyone just suddenly. And they did that, and I thought, oh my god, we're off. And I can't remember exactly what happened, but I shanked the very first note.
No,
So,
did you
yeah,
really?
Yeah, but this is why I can't remember, because what it's like, you go 1, yeah, that was what it was. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, you're in, right? But I mistook where the 1 was based on, like, is the 1 there, or is it like I just something happened, right? But so I played a note expecting it to be there, but it wasn't. It was somewhere else. And I don't quite know how this happened. It was fine. It wasn't a wrong note, but just it wasn't where I expected it to be. So, and I kind of laughed it off because it was like I got away with that. That's the first note.
Did you
I was
get
really
a look
relaxed.
down?
No, look, it was not a mistake. It was not a mistake, but it was something that happened in my mind that was. Anyway, like, so we carried on, and I remember there's one bit that like I sort of even couldn't play because it was like it was really weird, but I just glossed over it. But here's the thing: this is what happened. It haunts me to this day. I was counting. This is awful. I was counting like, you know, some bars of rest. And that's any musician will tell you that's the worst when you've got like 48 bars and it's like whatever, and then you've got the 1 note there. So you're in the West End, Les Miserables. There's however many people, you can't really see them, but they're all out. And I was counting. 1, okay, get ready. 1, 2, 3, 4. Played the note completely in the wrong place. On my own. I could hear it coming out the front completely wrong. So I catch it to stop it as quickly as I can, but I want to die in that moment.
Yeah,
it's just the worst. It's the worst moment of my life. Kind of lived a privileged life, I suppose, but got a little bit of a look. Carried on the show. Did okay. Now, actually, if you rewind, the first number's quite cool. I can't remember it, but you're just playing a load of Fs, and it's like dun. It's quite good. And the conductor gave me a look and a one of those to my bass teacher Dom as well. Like he'll do good. So I did that, and I was like, oh. So you know, I got the train back with Dom and whatever, and he's like, yeah, so how do you think that went? And I obviously sort of mentioned that, and he was really cool about it. He was totally cool about it. These things happen. And I remember he made a mistake, like one mistake. I must have gone in 6 times to watch him do it. He would do this, right? There would be, he'd play, then he'd have a book, and he'd read his book, and he'd know, because obviously the cues, the vocal, he'd know exactly when to put that down, and he was all over it. He was unbelievable, but he made like one mistake somewhere, and he just like he laughed and carried on. I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, it doesn't matter. And so that one, I was like a lot more introverted and a bit shy back then. I was a bit disgusted at myself, to be honest, that had happened, and I just wanted to completely die. But we sort of mentioned that, but then he was also really cool. He was like, yeah, there's a bit here where I was so lucky to have tuition like that. He was like, yeah, the 16th notes there, make sure you subdivide them. Great tip. Like, you know, I wasn't quite playing them right, so it's like, you know, count there and really practical tips.
Yeah.
And I know of some people that have done exactly what I did. You go in the pit, you do the show, and they haven't been called back. And I got called back a few times.
That's good.
So, and that never happened to me. But you know, that haunted me. That absolutely
pressurized, isn't it?
Yeah, that was probably the worst thing. I mean, you know what? I can still hear the note ringing out in that. I can still hear it as bad. And I don't know what I thought. I don't really, I got through it. I don't know. You don't get told. No one, it's the professional world. No one tells you off. No one does anything. You just, you just carry on. Life moves on. But for me, it was like, for years, it was just like, I'm still like shaking thinking of that moment. But you carry on. I wasn't cancelled. I was asked back. It's just a mistake. And you realize that reminds me of, if you go onto YouTube and you type in Pink Floyd mistakes, like my favorite ever. Well, my introduction to Pink Floyd was the Pulse album, the live early 90s. I love that album. There are loads of clips online on YouTube of massive mistakes on that tour. The keyboard player had his transpose button and he didn't press it back, so he started in the wrong key, and David Gilmour just laughs and says we'll start, and loads of stuff happened. You got to, and it's just like at that level, if stuff like that can happen at that level. Yeah. Then I think I told my David Gray story. Did I tell you that story where Teenage Cancer Trust at the Royal Albert Hall? They have artists that come in and they do it all for charity, and it's great. And David Gray was asked to do it, and he was doing it with a guitarist, but his guitarist's wife was due to give birth, and sure enough, he got the call to go home. So David Gray suddenly on his own. I think he was asked very, very last minute, as they are for those gigs. They're asked they're asking people up to the couple of days before. So David Gray, who is he's a pop star from England who was big, I think, in the 90s and 2000s, but he's still around. He's amazing. You should check him out. But he found himself on his own in the Royal Albert Hall, 5,000 people. It's kind of an amphitheatre, isn't it? And you're sort of in. Was he in the middle? I think, yeah, he was on the main stage, I think. But everyone's just there on you, looking at you. And he was really cool. He's got this amazing, and this is the other tip, I think, is just to realize that mistakes don't matter too much. He was just on his own. He made a couple of mistakes and just made light of it, and talking about his guitarist, and that was cool. And then at one point, he was playing, and his mic stand was just like, it was just like drooping like this, just like slow. And he had two hands in the middle of the song, two hands, and he was just like following it down. And then obviously you got the roadie that comes round, and this roadie like came around professionally, brilliant, but it wasn't quite right. And the roadie just like really professional. He was just sort of behind the piano, and David Gray's doing this really somber. Do you remember This Year's Love? Any English people of it, you should listen to it. It's brilliant. And he's singing it, and then he sort of like keeps playing. He's like, "You do know they can see you, don't you?" Because he's like hiding behind and everyone just starts laughing, and it's like he just made a bit of a joke about it, and that's the thing. It's just that's what people are there. They are there to be entertained and to feel relaxed and to feel like you're in good hands. And I think most people freak out at the thought of mistakes, but I think for most people the tension from audience members comes when you're sensing some sort of nerves, I think, in a way. If you just relax as a performer, laugh, smile through it, no one really cares if you make an error. They really don't. And the Pink Floyd stuff at that top level is like anyone can. When you see the live stuff, it's all repaired anyway, isn't it? So but that's the worst. That's the worst note I've ever played. That Les Mis note.
Thanks for sharing, Dan.
I've never shared it before.
You need to have a lay down now.
Yeah, it was also a whole note. It didn't develop into a whole note, but it's the easiest note you can play. And I was so confident. It's like 1, 2, here we go.
89, 2, 3, 4, 9.
Yeah. But I got us back. So good. It wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
Can someone take over? Like, I've got a bit of residual shock. I need to say someone bring us. I need to remember the Danny Mills story.
So I can't remember what Danny Mills story you're thinking about, Dan.
I just think like thinking on your feet in that band was a big thing because of stuff being literally thrown at you. I had a shoe thrown at me once on one of his gigs, but you sort of carry on. But that was it. It was another one of these gigs. Like, you do loads of weddings and it's someone's special day, right? So you're having a laugh and everything, but you've got to be professional. And that's why he gets asked back a lot. Anyway, he's he's given me the first dance to learn. It was something like Human by the Killers, but I learned Human by someone else. And like we're walking like to set up on stage, like 2-3 minutes to go, and he's like, "Yeah, you've got the tune, haven't you?" Guys, I'm like, "Oh no, I've learned the wrong song here." Now, a couple of tips here is I can read music and I could knock up a chord chart. So I thought it was the Killers one. It was the other one. So I'd learned the Killers one. And so on the way there, I've got Spotify. I don't have headphones. I've got Spotify, piece of paper. And I'm like, oh no, that's right. And yeah, I mean, the in these kind of gigs, you don't really, sometimes you can't rehearse. There's no sound check. You're just on. That was one of those gigs. We usually go through the first dance, but we didn't. So learn the first dance, learn the correct first dance. It happened at another thing where another person we know, I won't mention, he played the wrong first dance. He had the wrong first dance on his Spotify and he played it and he ruined their first dance, and there was no internet to get the real one. So that ruined it. So learn the first dance properly, learn to chart, always, have internet ready. Yeah. That was again, you learn from all these situations.
This is probably putting off first giggers. All of this.
Yeah, no. But the thing is, like, there are different types of gigs. Like the one in Buckingham Palace was you rehearse. The Les Mis, you rehearse. You know what you're supposed to do. It's not, like an improvised jazz gig. You start, you finish. You know exactly the steps you're supposed to take to get from the beginning of the concert to the next. Some gigs are a bit freer, like a funk gig. You could improvise a bit, and generally that's what it is. But the kind of gigs we've done, sometimes things are thrown at you, sometimes you can't prepare, and that in itself is a skill.
My most pressurized one by far was the first Queen one I did. So it's like 2 hours of music, and I remember that, and because they have, like, it's all to click, so they have certain sounds on backing tracks, so just fill it out a bit. I'd never seen the backing track machine before. Right. Yeah. I've never sat there with a microphone there before, right? Because I had to do backing vocals as well, and there was no rehearsal. It was straight in. And then this gig was like 3,000 people at St David's Hall in Cardiff. It was packed, and I go out on stage on my own at first, and I'm going, just see each song, John, like an exam. Right. That exam's over. Next song. And I had a little iPad. I could discreetly have my iPad with some notes, but you still got to perform it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wasn't told that the stage would go pitch black at first. So I didn't have a torch or anything like this. And I've got my in-ears in, and I plug into the machine, right? And so I can hear the thing starting, and I know when I need to come in. But I can't see where I need to plug my in-ears.
Oh, no.
And I'm going, so I'm feeling around on it, right? And going, oh no. And I'm going, I've got a whole show to get through here. And I'm all feeling like I'm falling at the first hurdle, and you can't, once these tracks start, you can't just turn them off and turn them back on again and start again. Honestly, trying to regroup after each song was an absolute mission.
I think that's another tip: pack a torch. Yeah. And I think
pack a torch.
On that note, after an hour, should we? We'll wrap this. I need a stiff drink after that.
Yeah. Well done.
It's a bit early for us. It's only 10 o'clock in the morning for John and me.
Yeah. Although, Gary, it's 5 o'clock somewhere in the world, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, here it's 9:05 here. So I've got to play football later, but not before that stiff drink. Yeah. So I enjoyed that one. Yeah, I enjoyed that one. It's all good fun. That's at the end of the day. It's not it's not rocket science. We're not saving lives here. We're just musicians having fun. I think that's the thing. Just relax.
Changing lives, Dan.
Relax. Yeah. I want someone listening to this to actually not be put off by the horror stories and to actually take your instrument and do a gig. Honestly, it's great fun. And then do another one.
Character building, isn't it?
It's character building, and it's just relax, just prepare, relax, learn your craft, and it's all what it's all about, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Excellent.
Well, thanks very much for watching. We'll do another.
Thank you.
We're trying to do weekly podcasts, aren't we? And we're going to get some guests on. We'll do this format of just chatting like this. So if you've got any, questions, or could be about gear or the industry or whatever, just do get in touch with us.
Or therapy.
Therapy, yeah, we can offer that too. Gary, can you just tell them where to go and what to sign up to if they're not signed up to newsletters and things?
Yeah, groove-loops.com, and sign up.
Yeah,
we'll start the conversation.
We never really talk about what that is, but obviously it's our drums and bass loops, and we'll talk about more of that stuff as well. But yeah, thanks very much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.